The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is one of my favorite things ever. Whether it's the original radio series, the novels, TV series, comic, movie, or tell, I always have loved Douglas Adams' creation, along with the works of Ian Colfer and Dirk Maggs who have added to it. The first version was of course the radio series, which I consider to be the best version of the Hitchhiker story, but the most popular of all the versions is of course the novel series, especially the first book. Starting as a loose adaptation of the first phase of the radio series, the novel was a massive hit and was critically acclaimed by most people. With the novel being so popular, of course, it was inevitable that an illustrated edition of the book would be created. And it was! More than once. 4 separate times the guide was given lush and gorgeous illustrations, and all of which strangely went in completely different directions with how they went about doing it. I decided to take a look into each illustrated edition and see how they are on their own and how they compare to one another. So, let's get started. The first illustrated edition of the guide is possibly one of the most ambitious illustrated editions of any novel I've seen. One that brought the world of the guide to life in ways you'd expect out of a Hollywood film. No, not that one. I'm of course talking about the 1994 illustrated Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. In 1993, Douglas Adams, interested in graphics made on a computer, suggested Kevin Jon Davies be the illustrator of an illustrated edition of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. After being contacted by editor Emma Way, Kevin, whose drawing skills were somewhat poor, pitched the idea of digital composition with photographs, something he learned while working on commercials previously. This was thankfully exactly what they were looking for, and the book started production. Actors were cast, model spaceships and interiors were built, and monsters and props were sculpted or molded. Douglas Adams himself described the book as the movie that doesn't move. And honestly, it's a pretty accurate description. The photographs in the book honestly feel like they came right out of a never-made Hitchhiker's Guide film from 1994. The mix of actors, models, and props really make it feel like the book came to life. It's so incredibly impressive with the amount of models, creative alien designs, spaceships, and weirdness I'd expect from the guide. The visuals here are almost exactly how I imagine the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It's colorful, dark, and very weird in the best possible way. Also interestingly enough, it turns out there are 2 separate versions of the 94 book. In the US edition, which is the one I have, Hitchhiker on the cover is spelled as just one word, whereas in Australia and the UK, Hitchhiker is actually spelled as 2 separate words. Nothing really that important, but I thought it was interesting nonetheless. The actors were all unknowns for the most part. Apparently they had planned to use some of the TV actors in the illustrated book, but that didn't happen. And while I will admit the lack of Simon Jones upsets me, the actors that were given the roles are all pretty fitting looks for the characters. Marvin also looks absolutely fantastic. According to Kevin Jon Davies himself, Douglas thought they got closer than anyone else to his real idea of how Marvin looked. And I really do love his look in the book. He looks so clean in advance, yet due to how his eyes are positioned and how he's always slouching, he just looks utterly pathetic. It's a really great look for Marvin. I honestly just find the book visually impressive for numerous reasons. The Vogons and many of the aliens were actually sculpted or molded, and I really dig the designs of them. They kinda remind me of Clay Fighter, in a good way. So many parts just look great. Even details you wouldn't think they'd bring to life, like Prosser imagining the horsemen yelling at him, or the teaser playing a prank on some poor fool, are illustrated and just look visually wonderful. There's also some surprises in this book, like how these pages of the missiles fold out and reveal this amazing 4-page spread. It was also the first appearance of the 42 puzzle, a game created by Douglas Adams which would later be used for various Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy covers. There's also 2 pages where we see the extra sensitive cops at a creative-looking alien bar, who, might I add, are played by series creator Douglas Adams and his literary agent, Ed Victor. This book just feels like it was made with so much love and care. There's countless details added which make the book so much more interesting to look through and read. Small details like Slarty Bartfast's signature appearing behind the text when it's mentioned, certain notable sentences being enlarged in different fonts, a literal heart of gold appearing behind the mention of the starship heart of gold. Not only is the book a treat to read, but it's a treat to just look around every page to see what's there. This edition surprisingly didn't do very well though. Kevin stated this was due to the easily destroyed silvery diffraction grating holographic cover, along with the price, which was $42 at release. Regardless of the kind of crap easily destroyed cover, I absolutely adore this illustrated edition of the book. It honestly may be my new favorite version, and whenever I get around to reading the book again, it'll most likely be this version. The 1994 book is an absolute must-have for any Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fan. If you can find a copy for a decent price, or just need to get rid of quite a few Altarian dollars, definitely grab it if you can. So, I'll be honest, I initially thought there were only 3 illustrated editions of the guide. But then the art director of the 94 book, Kevin Jon Davies, actually responded to my video preview on Twitter saying there was another illustrated edition, which is kind of cool. For the 25th anniversary in 2004, an illustrated collector's edition of the guide was released. This version was mainly illustrated in the loosest sense. There weren't many actual illustrations of events in the book, aside from a babelfish, but the borders were decorated to reflect events in the book. Not that notable, except that this edition also includes a scrapbook and potted history at the start, which is pretty neat. From what I can tell, there's a lot of interesting information and pictures included in it. I currently don't have this edition, but I definitely think it looks pretty cool, and I'll probably pick it up at some point in the future. As should you. It looks pretty cool. On to the next one. From 2010 to 2016, Folio Society published illustrated editions of the first 5 Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy novels, with illustrations by Jonathan Burton. I don't actually own any of these either, but thankfully I've been able to find all the illustrations online, so I can go over them and give my opinion on them. Honestly, I feel this version is the most traditional out of all the various illustrated Hitchhiker guides, as it's exactly what you'd expect, traditional illustrations of the various events from the books. Not that that's a bad thing though. I really like Jonathan Burton's illustrations, and I feel they're justified if anything for giving us visual interpretations of So Long and Thanks for All the Fish and Mostly Harmless, which are the only visual adaptations of those stories in any form. It'd probably be the only visual adaptation of Life, the Universe, and Everything as well if the graphic novel adaptation didn't exist. And Another Things doesn't get a visual adaptation though. Poor Ian Colfer. Seems like no one wants to give his book the visual treatment. I feel Jonathan Burton's style does a fine job at adapting the written text to a visual medium pretty well. His color choices are a bit restrained, which I actually really like. I think it fits the guide pretty well. I really like how he draws the humans, world, and characters. It has its own little quirky feel. A lot of the visual interpretations of the characters that he draws actually remind me of other versions. Arthur and Zaphod kinda remind me of their TV show counterparts, while Ford kinda reminds me of his comic version surprisingly enough, especially with the ginger hair, though other designs look quite unique. Marvin looks especially sad in this version. Just a sad face, it makes you feel sad, man. And it's also great to have visual interpretations of many of the characters from later books which otherwise don't have any, such as the old woman in the cave in Random, though she also got another visual interpretation for the hexagonal phase. There's also a lot of praise to be given on how he draws out certain scenes from the books. In Life, the Universe, and Everything, Arthur has a chicken bone in his beard, which is there for the entire novel, basically. And thankfully, the chicken bone stays in his beard for most of the illustrations. His illustration of the asylum in So Long and Thanks for All the Fish looks absolutely mind-blowing. Just thinking about drawing this myself gives me an aneurysm. He somehow did it flawlessly. I also really love the illustration of Random and the bird from Mostly Harmless. The scene in South End is also creatively illustrated. No eggs in the sky like the 94 edition, but there's some donuts, so it's fine. The illustrated editions of the first 5 books are just really wonderful. That being said though, I don't own them because they're about $60 each. Each book costs around $60, which is quite a lot. If I do end up buying any, it'll probably just be books 4 and 5, as I need visuals of those stories for an upcoming Hitchhiker's Guide related project I'm working on. Still, if you're not broke like me and got the money, I definitely recommend picking these up. I also snagged a copy at my local Barnes & Nobles of the new 2021 illustrated edition of the Hitchhiker's Guide, with artwork by Chris Riddell. This version is also really good, though once again, it goes in its own direction different from the other editions. The 1994 book skull felt like bringing the novel to life with models and actors. The 2004 edition seemed to just want to decorate the pages, and the 2010 edition felt like transitioning the words into lovely traditional artwork. While the 2021 edition feels more focused on bringing the characters to life via Chris Riddell's extremely detailed and creative designs. Chris Riddell has an amazing talent for making detailed and creative designs as seen in this book. There's just so much detail in how he draws the characters and occasionally the environments. It just makes you want to keep looking at it. Though I think what I admire most about Chris Riddell's illustrations of the many characters of the Hitchhiker's Guide is that unlike many of the other adaptations of the guide, Chris really amps up the alien in most of the alien characters. The characters aren't just humans or humans painted different colors, they have different structures and biology. For example, Eccentra Golumbitz. She still looks somewhat human, but he just adds a bit more alien with the lack of legs and odd head shape / hair. This is in stark contrast to many other depictions, which, while still good, looks mainly just like a human with 3 breasts. Marvin as well looks absolutely fantastic. There's just so much detail into his design, it's just incredible. And this version of Marvin is probably the most alien out of all of them, and that's not a bad thing. The alienness of it just makes it look so unique and interesting. It's a really great look for Marvin. Zaphod's design is also really neat. I kinda like how the heads had different hairstyles and beards instead of just being the exact same face. Same goes for Zaphod's therapist, Gag Halfront. It has a weird looking long nose and large giant head. It's very surreal and stylized, leading to some of the best looking interpretations of many of the Hitchhiker's Guide's most memorable characters. And in the rare cases where Chris Riddell does end up drawing a background, whew, it is very detailed and very creative with how he does it. Again, it's just great to look at. The 2021 Illustrated Edition is great and only costs about 20 bucks. I would definitely recommend picking up a copy of the Chris Riddell Illustrated Guide if you get the chance. So, how do the Illustrated Editions compare with one another? Well, to be perfectly honest, it's hard to compare them as they all aim to do different things. The '94 book almost looks like a photographed version of a Hitchhiker's Guide feature film, like how it would have looked if it was made in the 90s. The 2004 book mostly just decorates the pages, but has a really neat scrapbook and history at the beginning. The 2010 book does what you'd expect of an illustrated edition by illustrating various scenes in a traditional manner, and doing so in a very lovely way, even going as far as to illustrating all but the final book. And the 2021 book instead goes for detailed and impressive illustrations of characters, some of which look better here than they do anywhere else. Honestly, I think all of them equally excel at what they were going for. I think my favorite is probably the 1994 book with art direction by Kevin Jon Davies, but that's just me. I could easily see why someone would prefer the gorgeously drawn scenes of Jonathan Burton's illustrated editions, the nice borders and scrapbook of the '04 edition, or the amazing character designs and scenes from Chris Riddell's illustrated edition. I think these books are amazing and worth it for any Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fan. If you got the money and the opportunity comes up to buy one of these, I'd say grab a copy. I don't believe you'll be disappointed. In any case, I've been Groovy Jake. Happy Towel Day, thanks for watching, comment, like, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and until next time, stay groovy.